The two sides of my family were divided on who told lies and who was honest. My mother's side were the liars, and my father's side were the truth tellers. The biggest liar of all was my great aunt Bernice. It started with when I was really young and I asked her how old she was, and she said, 18, just like your mother. I knew how old my mother was, so I knew that was a lie, but I didn't realize how long-standing a lie it was until a few years ago when I started doing genealogy research. Between coming to the US at the age of 10 in 1920 and the 1930 census, Bernice had only aged 8 years. In fact, she really was stuck on that number 18, and as the years went on, she basically ended up taking off 18 years off her age, so that it was only after she died that my Uncle Eli learned that he had actually married a woman who was 10 years older than he was. Bernice's other lies involve family history, and I can't be sure she knew that they weren't real. For example, my mother had a bamboo fan and an elaborate necklace with Chinese designs, and Bernice told me that they were things that my great-grandfather had bought my great-grandmother on his frequent trips to Shanghai as part of his fabric business. I have never found any evidence that he actually went anywhere other than Poland and eventually to the United States, but it could be true. The story I know can't be true was that she told me that her grandfather, my great-great-grandfather, had been personally killed by Hitler on his 100th birthday because Hitler was offended at the whole idea of there being a 100-year-old Jew. Aside from the fact that there's no evidence that Hitler personally killed anybody, I have my great-grandparents' wedding certificate, which says that my great-grandmother's father was already deceased, and there's similar evidence with, in the case of my great-great-grandmother, that when she died in 1906, her husband had already been dead for several years. So Bernice might have been told that by somebody else, but I think she just thought it made a better story. Now, my mother's lies were not necessarily quite so egregious as Bernice's, but they were somewhat frequent. She didn't lie about her age, but she lied about things that would make life more convenient for her. So, for example, when I was not quite 10 years old, we took a trip to Canada to go to Expo 67 in Montreal. On the way back, as we were crossing through the US border control, the agent asked if everybody in the car had been born in the United States. Now, I have to understand, my mother was the driver and my father was in charge of navigation and discipline. So it was Mom who was talking to the border agent, and she just said yes. I sat there rather astonished, knowing full well that my father had not been born in the United States, and if he had opened his mouth at all, people would have heard his accent and been skeptical. But I smartly waited until after we were safely back in the United States before asking her why she'd lied to the border agent, and she said, it's really much easier this way. As another example, as the years got on, late in her life, she began to lie for the sake of trying to make my brother and me feel that she was in better shape than she was in. So every time she had a fall in her house because she had lung issues and she couldn't breathe well, it wasn't a fall. The furniture leapt out and tripped her. The worst lie she told was one time when I was visiting her and she fell and I took her to the doctor and she was bruised and she told the doctor that I had hit her. I objected, but she said, really, it's much easier than letting it. As another example, when my brother and I were probably not quite we were about 10 and 11 years old. We took a trip to Suffolk County, New York, out to go to Montauk Lighthouse. And on the way back, we stopped at Hither Hills State Park. And then there was a nearby strawberry farm, one of those pick it yourself things. And you had to be 13 to be allowed to pick strawberries. Well, my brother and I were both tall children, so she claimed we were 13 and 14 instead of 10 and 11 like we really were, and they had no problems with it. And basically, Mom was willing to lie in order to get stoop labor from her children. Now, this is one where my father went along with that lie, and really, he should not have gone along with a lie involving child labor, because Dad had been subjected to some of the worst child labor in the world. He was born in Germany, grew up in Lithuania, and he'd endured the invasion of Lithuania by the Russians and then the Germans, and was eventually sent to Dachau. One day, there would be what were called selections, and people would be pointed to one line or the other, and only the people who were pointed to one of those lines would survive the day. Well, one day he noticed that there was an age difference between where people were being pointed, and he was a year too young to survive if he told the truth. So he decided he would lie about what his birth date was, and in order to make it harder for the Nazi officers to realize he was lying, he would also lie about the date as well as the year, so it would be harder for them to find any records. So he went from having been born on September 1st, 1930, to having the date September 15th, 1929 recorded. It saved his life, so it was a good lie. But later on, when he came to the United States, he tried to correct the records. And he found no way that he could get them corrected because his original birth certificate had been long lost in the war and the chaos. Finally, when he was naturalized, he told the judge that that wasn't his, September 15th, 1929 wasn't his real birthday. And the judge said, "Don't worry about it, you'll just collect Social Security a year earlier." Well, Dad didn't even know what Social Security was, but he gave up on trying to get the date corrected. He did not give up on celebrating his original birthday, and for good luck, he celebrated the September 15th as well. The tradition in our family was that on your birthday, you got to select where we would go out to dinner, which we lived in a small town. There weren't really a lot of choices. And given that my birthday was also in September, September saw us spending a lot of time at Palace of Wong. But I think back to all of these lessons I learned about when it's good to lie and when it's good to tell the truth. And I find myself wondering, how honest am I myself? I think I'll let you know next year when I reach my 18th birthday. Thank you.